Why, all of a sudden, is WHO making public comments against the sledgehammer approach of lockdowns as the rhetoric of the deadly consequences of letting healthy people go about their lives finally gets challenged both in the public arena and the courts? I'd like to post some comments on the observations by a well-known author and commentator I have followed for a while, with acknowledgements to his work and writings at the Bill Bonner Diary. Okay, so why is there still such a push for draconian COVID-19 lockdowns when the British magazine The Spectator reported in a video interview WHO envoy saying such restrictive measures should only be treated as a last resort? Dr. David Nabarro went on to say, the only time we believe a lockdown is justified is to buy you time to reorganise, regroup, rebalance your resources, protect your health workers who are exhausted, but by and large we'd rather not do it. He also went on to say tight restrictions could cause significant harm, particularly on the global economy. Lockdowns just have one consequence that you must never belittle, and that is making poor people an awful lot poorer, he said. Look what's happened to smallholder farmers all over the world. Look what's happening to poverty levels. It seems that we may well have a doubling of world poverty by next year. We may well have at least a doubling of child malnutrition. Hungry children, millions of them, trillions worth of real output are at stake. Trillions worth of phony stimulus and millions, maybe millions of lives. In the UK, GDP is said to be running about 10% below last year. In the US, in GDP alone, it looks like the lockdown will take about $1 trillion out of people's pockets, but the losses are not distributed evenly. Here in Australia, the pain of lockdowns have pushed people to bankruptcy and has allowed the state far more powers through various dictates by leaders who continue to push the lockdown measures as the way to combat the pandemic. If the Federal Reserve pushes up a billionaire's wealth by just 10%, 99 million other people could actually get poorer, but the headlines would still tell us we're all getting richer on average. At the top, even millions of dollars up or down doesn't make much difference. But at the very bottom, where the World Bank says there are some 700 million people living on less than $2 per day, an economic slowdown can mark the frontier between life and death. The experts say to lock the doors, stay at home, cover up and stay away. The train of thought that the medical experts will bring us longer lives is so erroneous. It was the plumbers, the farmers and the builders improved living standards, raised life expectancies all around the world. It was the entrepreneurs, the tinkerers and business builders, not the health professionals, especially those in the public arena. This is from Professors Marilyn Catlin and David M. Cutler, both of Harvard, and Thomas E. Gitson of Temple University. Growth in life expectancy during the last 2 centuries has been attributed to environmental change, productivity growth, improved nutrition and better hygiene, rather than to advances in medical care. Keep the plumbers and the bakers at home and living standards fall. So it is reasonable to expect, as the WHO implies, that when the economy go down, life expectancies will decline too. So can we guess what happens next? For every year of life saved for the rich oligarchs by shutting down the economy, there may be hundreds of years lost by the poor all over the world. Ireland has banned home visits. France has imposed a curfew in its major cities, and London has closed bars and restaurants. A waste of time? Worse? COVID-19 deaths, as reported by Johns Hopkins University COVID-19 website. Sweden, a country that did not lock down its business and schools, has suffered 570 COVID-19 deaths per million residents. But Sweden's surviving residents are enjoying the lifestyle that the world were enjoying a year ago. Lockdown USA, on the other hand, has suffered 600 deaths per million, high unemployment, and a miserable lifestyle, i.e. alive but not really living. Australia, the amount of deaths have not warranted the lockdown measures. What evidence says that lockdowns save lives? With the continued eradication and censorship of the evidence and the dialogue moving into Orwellian magnitudes, the truth is as much of a casualty as is any reports of death counts. Further, Sweden isn't worried about when the vaccine will appear, because its populace is now mostly immune, while other Europeans are now being insulted by a second wave. Swedes remain largely unaffected. But in the simple-minded view of the coronavirus cavalry, only one thing matters: beating the virus. The war. Liberty, constitutional rights, happiness, child hunger. Who cares about these when there's a killer on the loose? Within 2 weeks of President Trump announcing his state of emergency back in mid-March, it was clear that there was no emergency at all. From the initial numbers coming from Italy, we saw that the killer was no mass murderer. Instead, he was like a nursing home psychopath, singling out the weakest, the oldest, and the sickest. The first data told us that an average age of 80, an old person, was about 1,000 times more likely to die from the coronavirus than a person under the age of 20. The prudent approach would have been to bring a few good detectives, let them figure out how to keep old people and the virus away from each other. Instead, the politics declared war, with almost the whole economy put on a war footing. Now, 7 months and $4 trillion down the drain, the data hasn't changed much. A lot of people get the virus, but few are harmed from it. Indeed, it's such a deadly disease that you have to get tested to find out if you've got it or not. And then on top of that, is the testing actually viable? According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, if you are aged between 20 and 49, there's no point in worrying about it. Only 0.02% of the people in that age group who get it will die from it. Even from there up to the age of 70, it shouldn't be a big worry. If you get the disease, you only have 0.5% chance of dying. That's 1 in 200. At 70, the odds get worse. The old-timers should stay away from it. But even for them, nearly 19 out of 20 who get the disease come out okay. But the sword wavers had their blood up. It suited their vanity, their careers, their lust for power and glory. They saw that by frightening the public with a health scare, they could get away with almost anything. Then, of course, politicians began grandstanding, and the whole spectacle soon became a sordid political mess. And the results was yet another health crisis made worse by the government, by the state, the media, or the arena of politics and the experts themselves. Okay, time for critical thinking, people. What are you going to be doing? And how are you going to go forward with the possibility that they are coming for your freedoms?